Yo, fine scouts and intrepid internet travelers, welcome to my channel. I'm Josh, your binge buffoon, if you will have me. Today, I'm going to be doing a spoiler-y in regards to like moments and structure and stuff because it's history. And if you're familiar, it's not much of a spoiler. Review of Oppenheimer. I'm gonna start this review with the anecdote that explains what I imagine I titled this video. Please withhold your anger if you belong to Gen Z. I'm not specifically talking about you. And I apologize up front for playing into that negative stereotype that plagues your generation. It is shameless clickbait in a way. I suppose I'm a bit of a cranky old man here with what I'm about to tell you because as a millennial, I've spent my entire life with older generations hating on me and my own generation. That's just how it goes. We're just getting worse. Anyway, I go to see Oppenheimer last night, and the movie ends, the lights go up, and these dudes sitting next to me, presumably in their early 20s, well, one of them stands up and goes, "Way too long, way too much history." And then the guy sitting next to him goes, "Yeah, I fell asleep," as if to say it was boring, you know? A movie about the creation of what might destroy the world. Look, I get it. You hear Christopher Nolan and you think The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar. Maybe this film just wasn't for you. It is dense. And in reality, it's not just people of a certain age group that are going to react that way. And then the defense of a lack of patience, because it is 3 hours. It's super fucking long. And maybe some of the Los Alamos stuff could have been cut. Movies always feel longer in a theater, especially if you're like me and you have to pee all the time. Whatever that's about. I don't feel like going into the doctor and finding out. But in that moment, as the lights went up and I sat there in awe and vaguely terrified, I called my mom this morning and said I'm scared. Partially to make her laugh, but also because it's true. Maybe borderline self-righteous and pretentious as well, thanks to that amazing scene between Oppenheimer and Einstein and the imagery of the burning earth and Oppenheimer looking on in that plane. Which harkens back to stuff from earlier. To hear that from those dudes, it triggered me, okay? Just this memeable moment as I'm trying to absorb a film by my favorite writer-director. I guess in that moment, all I thought was, this dismissive attitude sort of reflects the flippant nature a lot of people exhibit in the film towards atomic power, and even today. Because it's a very timely film. Even the stuff with McCarthyism, because we just love to point fingers and demonize one another. Granted, you do sort of have to make fun of everything in life, so I'm going to give those dudes the benefit of the doubt. I went in thinking this was an important film, and I came out thinking the same thing. Besides, I'm not doing this review to chastise, I'm doing it because I can't stop thinking about this film. This film, I'm going to say inspired by the biography American Prometheus, about this young eccentric genius who has visions of the subatomic world. I mean, he's naive and romantic, kind of. Science is as beautiful to him as poetry. And in an effort to reconcile what's in his head with the reality in front of him, also, I suppose, to further his career, he brings the study of quantum mechanics to America. Well, he gets interested in physics and stuff, and then brings the study of quantum mechanics to America, which ultimately turns his dreams, visions into destruction and death, negating all the beauty that he began with. But I think that beauty that he began with is why he doesn't stop. Because this film, as much as it is about the Manhattan Project and the race to create the atomic bomb and the hydrogen bomb, it's also about ego and hubris, ambition, as evident by Oppenheimer and Strauss and America and Germany and Russia. Following that path, not just as individuals, but as a collective, we often sacrifice ideologies and integrity for the sake of progress. Clickbait titles are a small-scale example of this. Making decisions to hoist ourselves up. One day you're the most important man on earth, the next you're being tarred and feathered. That said, whether it be Strauss calling out Oppenheimer as a wannabe martyr, or Kitty Oppenheimer at the end of the film asking her husband, "Did you think that if they tarred and feathered you, the world would forgive you?" This film does a really good job of helping you to understand Oppenheimer and his motives, empathizing with him at times, but I don't think, at least for me, I never truly supported the decisions he was making. It's impossible to support the decisions that anyone's making. Really, it's an impossible situation. Nolan's script was written in the first person, and it does feel that way. Having been filmed in IMAX entirely, you really do feel Oppenheimer's stress, and Cillian does an amazing job just with his eyes, which I've heard other people say online. Like in interviews, just the other actors talking about Cillian. But also the imagery and the things that Nolan does in this film, as Oppenheimer's in certain situations, walls shake and the screen starts to go white and you feel like you're inside his head. The effects and the sound in this film really make it feel like this psychological experience. We don't have Hans Zimmer in this one. We have Ludwig Göransson. I first found out who he was because he worked on The Mandalorian, and I love the music in that show. I mean, he's comparable to Zimmer here in that it's this loud film. And I love that about Nolan films. I know some people don't, but in my experience, life is loud, so it just feels appropriate. Nolan's always been so intentional with sound, and that's never been more true than in this film. Throughout, it's a very loud film, but there's two moments in this film where it becomes very quiet that I can think of off the top of my head. During the Trinity test. This is later. I'm editing. I just wanted to add a little more context to what I'm about to say. Leading up to the bomb going off, like I was nervous with anticipation. I thought it was going to be like this huge jump scare where the whole theater shook. Like, because it's already a loud film. I thought it was going to be wild. But Nolan then subverts your expectations with this just dead silence. Because there's this moment when you hear that famous Oppenheimer quote. The character's mind shifts from beauty and creation to destruction and death. And then also, after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Oppenheimer makes that speech at Los Alamos, and the film delays the cheering, and it gets real quiet. Because Oppenheimer's saying these words that he now doesn't believe. Or maybe he never believed. We don't even really know what he believed. He was just so focused on the task at hand. But then there's all that imagery, and one woman's skin starts to fall off. All this joy is panic in his mind. The cheers or shrieks, It's silent, and then we start to hear and see all these things. But speaking of imagery, I really like the reoccurring raindrops at the beginning of the film, and then at the end in that pond when he's talking to Einstein. Also, no, you also see droplets when Oppenheimer's at the table arguing with Strauss about the atomic bomb or how we should try to halt progress on the H-bomb on the map. But specifically the raindrops at the beginning of the film and the end of the film, because there's this contrast from when he saw science is beautiful to now this thing that he used to help destroy the world. The imagery at the end, I think, confirms that he believes he's already destroyed the world, because him and Einstein had that conversation early in the film about how the Manhattan Project could potentially start a chain reaction that destroys the world. And at the end of the film, he says, I'm paraphrasing, it may not have happened as quickly, but I think I started that chain reaction that will destroy the world. And since science is no longer beautiful, he never reconciled his reality. Like other Nolan films, Memento, The Prestige, Inception, sort of, it has that scene that comes back around. Just like this film has a scene that comes back around. Batman Begins. This film uses a non-linear structure that I think was essential for the sake of pacing. I think if you're locked into this film, it doesn't feel 3 hours. Because there's essentially 3 time periods we're locked into, which is Oppenheimer coming up and then working on the Manhattan Project, Lewis Strauss's nomination, and then that closed hearing concerning Oppenheimer's revoked security clearance. And then there's also the few years after the war where we get that scene with Oppenheimer and Einstein. Since I've already mentioned that, the way that this film basically frames itself around that conversation with Einstein and Oppenheimer at the end of the film, initially you don't get to hear what they said to one another, but then you do at the end. I thought that was brilliant. I love when Nolan does shit like that, and it really it helped the film to hit so much harder. And I loved Tom Conti as Einstein. I know I've seen him in The Dark Knight Rises. He was in that pit, but he really has this presence in this film. You listen to him and you respect him. There's something so endearing and soft and kind about the way that he portrays Einstein. And so that when he tells Oppenheimer that, yeah, if you find out that this could destroy the world, we need to tell the Nazis. And you're just like, yeah, we probably should. Might as well just transition into the acting after saying that. Cillian Murphy, he's the man. He's the boss. There's nothing I can say about him that hasn't already been said. This is a tour de force performance. He's always been the man for me because I've seen him in all the Nolan films and I love him in Peaky Blinders. I love Robert Downey Jr. And I know he's a great actor. I did not expect him to deliver the way he does as Louis Strauss. I was surprisingly enamored with his performance in this film. I couldn't take my eyes off him. He stole the show when he was on screen. I wasn't even thinking about Oppenheimer. And when he started talking about how Oppenheimer wanted this, he wanted to be a martyr, I was like, yeah, man, I believe you. We don't know the truth of that. You can make that argument. Everyone is just so good. I expected Emily Blunt to be amazing, and she delivers. Rami Malek has one speaking scene, and it's incredible. I didn't look at the cast list going in. I just knew that Emily Blunt was in this, Cillian Murphy was in this, Robert Downey Jr. was in this, Matt Damon was in this, but I didn't look at the full list. And when I went into this film, that locked me in. I kept going, oh, look! Then Gary Oldman shows up as Truman. I mean, it makes sense, given his history with Nolan, but I didn't see that coming. And then I was even more surprised at the alleged accuracy of that scene when I looked it up. Oh yeah, obviously I knew Matt Damon was in this, but I was really surprised at how much I liked him and his character. Even more surprised with Josh Hartnett. Casey Affleck surprised me. Kenneth Branagh. Eldon Harris, whatever his last name is, the guy who played Han Solo. Loved him in this too. Dane DeHaan. Benny Safdie. David Desmalchian. Jason Clarke. Matthew Modine. Jack Quaid. Josh Peck. The film is so potent acting-wise. And Florence Pugh was great. Even though I didn't realize until a few days before I saw this, but this was Nolan's first R-rated film since Insomnia. Ever since he became more mainstream, I think his thing was appealing to as wide of an audience as possible. So I expected PG-13. I think the only reason it was even rated R was some of the imagery. They say fuck a few times, and then the sex scenes I felt were a little weird. Maybe because I didn't expect them. I'm not going to go as far as to call them gratuitous, but there's that scene when Oppenheimer's essentially getting interrogated about his relationship with Florence Pugh's character, and Emily Blunt's Kitty's watching on, and then Florence Pugh's just on top of Cillian Murphy, and they're doing it in front of everybody. That felt super awkward, and it probably was supposed to. So it was effective in that way, but yeah, that threw me a little bit, I'm not going to lie. I sort of just looked around in the theater like, okay. It felt in a way like you were watching a sex scene with your parents. Within the context of this film, that's what it felt like for me. Regardless, this film really validates the saying that there are no small roles, only small actors. Everyone was so effective. I love how morally gray everyone is, for the most part. What I love about Nolan and his films is they never really come off as sanctimonious, like maybe I do sometimes. He said this in interviews, but his stories aren't meant to be didactic, merely engaging. What you take away from them is on you. One of my main train of thoughts coming out of this film was, can we forgive Oppenheimer like he wants to be forgiven in this film? Sure, he gave a bunch of leaders power they never should have had, but if he didn't do it, someone else probably would have. Anyway, whether they have been American or Russian, the rat race is inevitable, and we're incapable of setting aside our differences for the better of humanity. There are just so many moving parts to this film, and in that way, it's not simply entertainment, it's art, and sometimes art requires work, patience, energy, and focus in order to properly engage with it. Because a surface level reading of anything is bullshit. Especially when you're talking about generations, groups of people, history. I think that's all I have for this one. Big love to everyone who's bored enough to join me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Drive me off this platform if you must, otherwise like, subscribe, dislike for cathartic reasons. Drink water, stay young, and remember, don't be an idiot, be a buffoon. Peace.